You are Locked On Wolves POSTCAST, part of Locked On Minnesota on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
T-Wolves, they kept it close, but they couldn't buy a bucket in crunch time tonight. Final score versus the Rockets, 121-115. What's going on? Back in the lab, back at it. Another T-Wolves POSTCAST episode right here on the Locked On Sports Minnesota Network. Your team every day. Jack Borman with me, as always. Give him a follow on X, at JRBorman13. Jack, lots to get into. A 48-point first quarter for Houston. How the Wolves kind of clamped down and rallied all the way back, but came up short in the end. But first, quick reminder, tonight's episode brought to us by Game Time. Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. That's LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. All right, so Wolves obviously coming out of the All-Star break, 25 games left on the schedule, started in Houston tonight. No Rudy Gobert. Maybe they had too much time on the couch this last week because the Rockets come out, they put up a season high 48 points in the first quarter. Now, Wolves did rally back. They go into halftime down one. Kind of fast forward to the last 3, 4, 5 minutes left in the game. Wolves down 3, and, credit to the defense. They made stop after stop, it felt like, but couldn't buy a bucket when they needed one the most. Jaden McDaniels 1 for 7 from 3 tonight. That certainly didn't help. Wolves shot 29% from deep. Houston shot 50% from deep. So huge swing there. Again, final score 121-115. Wolves dropped to 31-26 on the year. I always like to start big picture here real quick, Jack. Another fun game. I mean, would you still love to see this matchup in round one come playoff time? But, more kind of on the micro, this game specifically, what frustrated you the most with those final 5 minutes when it just came to like generating a bucket when they needed one?
Yeah, I just think it comes down to your best players' shot selection and decision making. I think for as much as we all love Anthony Edwards and think the world of what he has done so far in his career and what he can do for the remainder of it. This Timberwolves team is continued to struggle in the clutch, over and over and over again. They're 26th in the league in clutch time net rating. They have 20 losses in the clutch, which I believe is the most in the NBA this season. I just think a lot of it has to do with, Ant continuing to struggle in both of those areas. Jaden McDaniels continues to miss wide open threes that are, good possessions that the Wolves do generate. And Chris Finch continues to struggle with who to close with. And I'll start off by saying, really quickly, like bringing Mike Conley back into the game after how that game went, after how they hunted him repeatedly on defense. He couldn't hold a candle to Amen Thompson. And how could you expect him to? Because Amen Thompson is 6'7", 215 pounds, is the most athletic player in the entire NBA for my money. You're just putting him in a bad spot. And I would get it if Mike Conley is in the game to handle the ball and organize the offense and get guys in their spots and run some stuff. But he just stood in the corner the whole time. He barely touched the ball. I mean, he's a 44% corner 3-point shooter. I get it. But I understand why Finch, thought that could be helpful, but I just completely disagree with the logic there. I thought that either Terrence Shannon Jr. or Jalen Clark would have been better options, considering that they're both better than Mike defensively, and Terrence for sure is going to give you more offensively. And it just feels like he's been going, 3 for 5 or 4 for 5 on these closing lineups, and it's been really hurting them. But the Wolves 1 of 7 with a 1 of 7 shooting with a turnover from the 5-minute mark of the fourth quarter to the 32nd mark of the fourth quarter. And that's the game right there.
Yeah.
Look, I get, you have to point out the fact that Timberwolves do not have 3 pretty important players to their team here, but that shouldn't completely crater your process in the clutch time on the offensive end of the floor. The fact that they didn't get Ant off the ball, after that timeout when Ant took a horrible 3 early in the clock and then Finch called a timeout after they got a stop on the other end of the floor, they had Ant run off a double staggered pin down and then was able to get around that, wall that the Rockets had built on the perimeter and then just smoked a layup. But how do they not start with Ant off the ball more? I think when Ant starts off the ball, it stimulates better ball movement in the half court. and better player movement as well. And you could get Naz Reid involved. They didn't get Naz Reid involved in the game at all once he came back in the game midway through that fourth quarter. And that was what was disappointing, considering that, Naz Reid is a legitimate all-star caliber offensive player, completely dominated the Rockets for most of the first three quarters when he wasn't in foul trouble. And to not get him the ball a little bit more, especially when Ant was gassed and Ant was struggling, it was really tough.
I know we're talking a lot about offense. First of all, a couple sequences that just really stick out in such a close game. Naz Reid, you talked about him, had the 5 fouls, had to sit with, probably an extra 4, 5, 6 minutes in the fourth quarter when they really needed him. Terrence
by the way,
Shannon,
really quick.
Yeah, go
really
ahead.
Quick.
Yeah.
Those third and fourth fouls that Naz got called for in the third quarter were both awful.
Terrible.
Awful.
Yeah,
terrible.
Terrible. Terrence Shannon, I think Jeff called it out earlier. Terrence Shannon had like a 5-point swing the wrong way when he stepped out of bounds. It was a hustle play, trying to get an easy 2, ends up getting the ball, fumbles it, steps out of bounds. Houston gets the ball back, hits a 3. So that's a 5-point swing. Jalen Clark was like a tenth of a second away from stealing 2 points at the end of the half as well, which was such a fun play. I mean, that was so close to being like a SportsCenter top 10 play, but a lot of different sequences, and every team can do this after every close loss. But it's easy to go back and pinpoint some of those sequences and say, man, if we even just had one of those sequences back, maybe those final 2-3 minutes unfold just a little bit differently. I know we're talking a lot about offense right now, but how much different does this game look if Rudy Gobert had been out on the court, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, certainly you're probably not giving up 48 points in the first quarter, but I think you can't overlook how they improved on that, the final 3 quarters. I think for Houston, they shot 6 of 7 at the rim. They scored in the first quarter. They scored 22 points in the paint in that first quarter. And then from there on, the final 3 quarters, Houston shot 8 of 25 at the rim, 32% for the rest of the game, to put them at 47% on the game. And the league average shooting at the rim is 66.5%. So the Timberwolves were legitimately excellent. The final 3 quarters of this game, in this entire month of February, the McDaniels and Naz Reid front court has a defensive rating of 99.5 in 218 minutes coming into this game, which is the most of any 2-man pairing that the Timberwolves have played this month. And those 2 guys deserve a ton of credit for the way that they absolutely battled their rear ends off on that end of the floor. And I thought Nikhil, his defensive rebounding activity was awesome. And I thought that Ant should have gotten more involved in on the glass. Only 4 rebounds for him was pretty tough. But yeah, I think again, like you're hoping that Şengün doesn't get as many of those put back opportunities that he had. But again, I mean for the Timberwolves tonight, Houston is the number 1 team in the NBA in both offensive rebound percentage and second chance points, and to win on the second chance scoreboard 12-8. And only give up 9 offensive rebounds to Houston on a night when it's kind of a helter-skelter all over the place. Naz is in foul trouble. You're playing really small. I think they did about as well as they could on the defensive end of the floor, especially considering that start for them to put up 73 points in the final 3 quarters is pretty darn good.
Yeah, you'll take that every time. Yeah, well said. Good breakdown there. Plenty more deep dive for this one. How much blame does Finch need to take tonight? Plus, maybe we'll hand out some grades for the young pups. Shannon, Clark, Dilly, all those guys. That's all coming up right after this. Quick reminder, tonight's episode brought to us by FanDuel. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook and official sportsbook partner of the NBA. Right now, FanDuel's giving you a chance at a huge return, $150 in bonus bets, guaranteed when you win your first $5 wager. Why love FanDuel? When you get the hunch in the middle of the game, you can go check out the latest stats. You can view live play-by-play and so much more, all on the same page where you place your bets. Again, $150 in bonus bets, guaranteed when you win your first $5 wager. Go check it all out over at FanDuel.com. Get in on some NBA future action while you're there. there. Naz Reid, 6 Man of the Year odds. It's now sitting at 5-1. It's all sitting up over at FanDuel.com. Again, check it all out over at FanDuel.com and get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you win your first $5 wager. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, an official sportsbook partner of the NBA. All right, so sticking with the big picture theme here, we'll get into some more nuts and bolts, some team stats, analytics, all that. But like, how much does, again, one game, but I mean, trying to find maybe the glass half full here, find some positives. Like, how do you feel, I guess, after, watching the way this game unfolded, but knowing, and maybe we should touch on DDV and Julius and these guys' injuries when they're supposed to come back. Maybe you can give us a quick 30 seconds on that. But just knowing when this team does get fully healthy, we've seen some really good battles with Houston, and who knows if they're going to end up matching up with Houston in the first round or not. But, I mean, how do you feel about this team kind of big picture when they do get all their big guns back and everybody's kind of meshing together once again that we saw earlier in the year back on the court?
Yeah, I feel really good just because you have more options and more buttons to press, right?
Yeah.
I think that, nights when we were playing, or the Wolves were playing that 8-man rotation, and you didn't really feel like you could trust anybody beyond that because you hadn't seen them yet. I think now that you've seen them, you certainly will feel better going to 9 or 10 in certain situations, and depending on the matchup, which I think is important. And that I think you feel a little bit better if any guy gets into foul trouble, that you should be able to backfill those minutes pretty well. But and then just on the injury front, I was honestly kind of surprised that Mike was able to go tonight. They had to re-dislocate his finger before the All-Star break.
Excuse me?
So it could grow back, or so it could, it wasn't healing properly. So they had to re-dislocate it and then let it heal on its own. So it's great that Mike was able to play tonight. But then, Rudy sounds like his back is not doing great right now. It sounds like Julius is the closest of those guys to be coming back. Would not surprise me if Julius is back early in the week, this coming week. And then Dante's probably, 2 or 3 weeks out now that he's back on the court, doing non-contact stuff. So
we're
certainly expect
close.
Julius back,
Piece by piece.
Julius back, then Rudy, then Dante. So hopefully by, mid-March, you've got everyone back and running.
Well, just for somebody like me, not the expert like you are, what is the ripple effect when they get Julius back first and foremost? Who's losing minutes? The first and second guy on that bench to maybe start to get some time cut, and then when DDV gets back, just the ripple effect, because it has been nice, and we'll talk about the young guys here in a second, but it has been nice. Again, obviously inconsistent, but you got to take the good with the bad with some of these rookies and young guys, but nonetheless, it has been somewhat refreshing just to see some of these young guys kind of untapped, high-ceiling performance games once in a while. But what's the ripple effect? Julius comes back. Who's the first guy or two in line, I guess? And what are the pros of getting Julius back that you think the Wolves are going to improve on?
Yeah, for sure. I think first and foremost, the Luka Garza minutes are going to go out, because Julius is probably going to slot back into that starting lineup, especially if he's back before Rudy. I think that would make it a little bit easier to kind of reintegrate him, just because he played phenomenal basketball alongside Jaden McDaniels and Naz Reid in that front court. And I think that, Jaden's been able to show a little bit more of that scoring bag and has, been able to play the three more effectively, or not necessarily play the three, but just play on the perimeter more effectively. It has been super helpful. So I think his playmaking will really do a lot to help make things a little bit easier for Ant, especially on the drive. But to take some attention away from Ant and Naz, which would be huge. And then I still think that, Jalen and Terrence will continue to play if those guys, if Rudy's down or if Dante's down. But yeah, I think they definitely need another guy in that big man rotation that can come in and, rebound, provide some scoring inside, be another body you can throw at guys. I mean, you saw that Ant was guarding Şengün tonight down the stretch because Naz had 5 fouls and they didn't want Naz on Şengün with, how he was flopping around like a car dealership inflatable. But so that'll certainly help. And I think having another guy that can go out and get you 30 points, 25, 30 points on any given night, or have, 14 points, 9 rebounds, and 8 assists is just going to be super helpful to kind of fill in the gaps where they need him to.
There was a point in the game when Jaden McDaniels was the biggest guy on the court for the Wolves. And like Jaden's not a small guy, obviously, but that obviously doesn't bode well for, over the longevity of those 4, 5, 6, 7 minute sequences, I guess, if you will. But yeah, can't wait to get Julius back. They definitely need some big ball, some bully ball back in their kind of identity and DNA. That's for sure. A lot of frustration in the chat about Coach Finch. How much blame in that pie chart of blame should he get? I guess where's your frustration at with Coach Finch? I know obviously you're a big Finch guy, as am I as well. But maybe talk people off the ledge a little bit, just given the lack of toys and tools he had to play with tonight. Where are you on the Finch blame chart?
Yeah, I think largely he's navigated not having Dante and Julius really, really well for the most part in terms of how this team's been playing on the offensive end of the floor and what they've been able to do. But yeah, I think, not playing Rob Dillingham after what Rob gave them in the first half, Rob had a pretty nice sequence that people will probably forget about. I mean, he had that steal and huge throwdown, then has another steal that then he turns into, tossing the ball to Ant and then forces a switch with a screen that leads to a 3 that ties the game at 55. And then the next trip down takes a bad 3 in transition and Finch calls a timeout to cuss him out, chew him out, and bench him for the rest of the game at that point. And this is on a night where Mike was borderline unplayable for most of the game. And Finch is just looking for any reason not to play Rob Dillingham, it feels like. And Rob has totally been up and down and has had his good games and his bad games. But for him not to come back and play in the second half and him to continue to play Mike and Nikhil as much as they did was really tough, considering that this was a night where pretty much the only area outside of 3-point shooting that the Rockets beat the Wolves in was bench points. It was 25-14. And coming into this game again, the Wolves have really struggled to manufacture points off the bench. 23 points per game over their last 5 games off the bench coming into tonight, second lowest in the NBA. And then you turn in 14 tonight, which is about as bad as you can have in an NBA game in today's day and age, was tough. So,
yeah. And, I mean, they go into the All-Star break.
And then you have the Conley closing decision that we talked about too, which is tough too. So it was probably a D+, C- at best night for Finchy.
Yeah, I was just going to mention too. I mean that fantastic, maybe the game of the year. They end the first half on going to the All-Star break. That win versus OKC. I remember you had talked about the night before. Hey, the bench is going to be such a huge deciding factor in that. When the bench balled out, that was one of their rare, pretty good performances, and proofs in the pudding. When that bench shows up, certainly the wins start to rack up a lot more than the losses. That's for sure. Real quick, 60 seconds before we go to segment 3. Just kind of your broad overview on the young guys. I'm still having fun watching these young guys, Jack. I know they're inconsistent, but again, Jalen Clark almost had that SportsCenter top 10 shot. I think he had 3 steals tonight. Definitely some things we can pick on for sure. Dilly threw down a highlight dunk, which is cool. I'm a big Terrence Shannon Jr. guy. I'm going to take all the bad with the good more times than not. But just kind of your broad overview as far as like growth, development on a game-to-game basis. What are you seeing from those 3 guys?
Yeah, I think, we talked about it from Dillingham, that I think Finch is just tougher on him than the other 2 guys for sure. And seems to be kind of third in the pecking order there behind the other 2 guys. But yeah, I think Jalen Clark, again, offense is going to come and go. He didn't take a shot tonight, but I thought he played really strong defense in the minutes he played. He had 3 steals in 20 minutes, had some really impressive reps too, guarding Şengün one-on-one when Naz was in foul trouble. I think he continues to show that, he's more of a 4 in this kind of construct of the team, which is interesting for him, considering that he's going to play out of the corner a lot of times, can cut, get his nose in there on the glass too. Just, he's not going to really play outside of himself, which is what you want, especially for a young player. And then, with TJ, I think he just brings something that no one else on the team can bring with his, force and ferocity that he plays with in transition, and the athleticism that
the horsepower
he can turn.
He's got the horsepower
totally
under the hood, man. Yeah,
totally. The fact that he can just turn a simple stop into a transition opportunity out of thin air is super valuable for this team. And for the Wolves to have 23 fast break points tonight, that was awesome. I think some of the pace that he he likes to play with in the open court is awesome. And I think he looks really comfortable on the offensive end of the floor. And then on the defensive end of the floor, he stood up Dylan Brooks multiple times on the drive, had a super impressive low man rotation on Şengün to force kind of a missed like dunk. I don't know what you call it, where he just kind of like tried to dunk it. The ball flew out of his hand, went over the backboard. So yeah, I certainly would put TJ at the top of that pecking order, but have no qualms with playing Jalen Clark as the ninth guy moving forward for certain spells if Nickeil is struggling and you want another defensive option out there. But I think when you're comparing TJ and Jalen, I think Jalen is kind of a Nickeil kind of backup, if you will, but TJ brings something that no one else brings, which is why I think it's important that he be the ninth guy over Jalen when everyone's back. And
you can make a case for all of them, but I hope that is the case that Shannon, just everything he's put out on film now at this point, out on the court, that Shannon just has that slight edge over Clark. A couple minutes left. We got to talk about this OKC back-to-back Sunday and Monday. That's all coming up right after this. Quick reminder, tonight's episode also brought to us by BetterHelp. When your schedule gets packed with work projects and more, it's so easy to let your priorities start to slip, even when we know what makes us happy. But when you feel like you got no time for yourself, non-negotiables like therapy, they're more important than ever. If you've been thinking about starting therapy, maybe it's time to give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online and designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited for your schedule. So simple. All you got to do, you fill out a brief questionnaire, you get matched up with a licensed therapist, and you can switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Never skip therapy day with BetterHelp. Go visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon today. You're getting 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. Hey, rapid fire real quick. I know we only got a handful of minutes left, but some first half awards. Rapid fire. Let's just rip through a couple. Most improved player. I assume most people are going to say Jaden McDaniels, albeit rough night tonight from three especially, but just given how good he's been offensively. But you tell me, most improved player from last year to this year for the Wolves. Who you got?
I think it would certainly be him. I think this is the longest stretch of sustainable growth that we've seen from him on the offensive end of the floor in terms of being able to expand what he brings. The ability to attack off the catch and in isolation, get to a spot in the mid-range, finish inside has been big time. And the rebounding too is something that you can't sleep on at all. So I'd for sure go with Jaden.
Most disappointing? Maybe just had a high bar at some point going into the year and just hasn't lived up to those expectations. Now, obviously, injuries, if you want to throw that into the equation as well, obviously there's a lot to choose from. But just most disappointing for you and your money, who you thought kind of just didn't reach that bar that you had set in the first half.
Yeah, I think you'd probably go with Mike just because Mike was
that's
so
fair.
Rock solid and steady all of last season. I think for probably the really early part of the season, maybe you could say Dante, but he came on so strong the last month, 6 weeks before he got hurt. So I would say Mike, which breaks my heart a little bit just because we all love Mike. But
no, I'm with you. I'm with you. How about a team stat or an analyst? I know you're a big analytic guy. You're putting up the spreadsheets all the time, or like a team category you're most surprised, for good or bad, in the first half of the season for the Wolves. Any like turnovers, paint point, anything. Maybe it's clutch time, honestly, but team stat you're just most surprised in the first half for the Wolves, for good or bad.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think I'd probably be surprised at how many threes they're getting up. For them to be sitting in the mid 20s last season in terms of their 3-point volume to now be up into the top 5 this season in terms of 3-pointers attempted. They're sixth right now, they're 7th in 3-point shots attempted per game. Is certainly something that's helped their offense trend up from the bottom half of the league this year to right around league average. So I wasn't necessarily expecting that getting rid of Carl.
Yeah, no, well said for sure. Best win or maybe like most entertaining game? Like I remember last year, it was like the third game of the year. It was the Boston game. Maybe it's the second game of the year, actually. But yeah, the Boston game always stuck out to me throughout the entire season, despite it being, again, one of the second or third games of the year. But best win or just most entertaining game. There's been some tough losses, but nonetheless, there's been a lot of entertaining games if you're just an NBA fan this year for the Wolves.
Yeah, I think I would separate the two. I'd say best win was probably the game against OKC with how shorthanded they were. And they needed that badly going into the break. But I'd say the best game that I was, helped that I was there, but that win they had over Houston a couple weeks ago was one of the best regular season NBA basketball games I've ever been to. Just with the chippiness, the energy in the arena, Ant having 41, other guys, role guys stepping up and playing huge. The offense was great. I mean, defense, both teams were just playing so hard. It was awesome to watch.
Last one here, most encouraging or exciting, highest ceiling, whatever you want to label it, but most encouraging or exciting young pup on the roster. I mean, you just kind of talked about and broke down Terrence Shannon Jr.'s game. Is he your pick with that, or could Dilly or Clark make a case?
I think it's probably TJ at this point, just because of the consistency at which he's delivered those flashes has been huge. I think Rob certainly has a super high ceiling and has electrified the crowd in important games this year, and has provided really
sparks.
Strong flashes at times of what we want to see from him. It's just a matter of getting more of them. So yeah, I would go with TJ.
OKC up next on the back-to-back Sunday and Monday. Again, win into the All-Star break. What was that? Maybe 8 days ago now. Maybe the win of the year, like you just said. How do you duplicate that same success you just had versus them in what was just a very fun, thrilling victory before the break?
I think they got to do a lot of what they did tonight. They looking at what Houston does really well.
Yeah.
Houston's number one in the NBA in fast break point differential. The Wolves won 23-15 in that category. Houston's number 4 in points off turnover differential. They're third in points off turnovers, opponent points off turnovers. Wolves won 26-8. They were plus 18 in that category. They won in the paint tonight. They won 12-8 in second chance points. That's a huge area you need to do well against OKC, because they've struggled to rebound the ball. They're in the bottom half of the league, bottom 10 in the league in defensive rebound percentage. And then, the other thing tonight that's can't sneeze at is Houston's awesome at taking more shots than their opponent, whether they manufacture that by turning the other team over, getting offensive rebounds, those types of things. Minnesota was +8 in field goal attempts tonight. And when you look at all that in totality, it's really hard to see how this Timberwolves team did not win this game tonight. Yeah. So I think there's a lot of underlying factors that bode well in terms of the Wolves being able to continue over what they did, tonight into, a 2-game set with OKC. But again, I think the most important thing, you got to take care of the ball. Only 9 turnovers tonight for the Timberwolves, which is an excellent mark. And then if they can continue to run, play with pace off of stops, and then crash the offensive glass, it is going to continue to be really important. And then obviously, you got to make 3-point shots, right? Timberwolves, tonight. I think one other thing for context, it's kind of important to note. Wolves are 11 of 38 from 3, only 29%. Houston shot 50%. But the Timberwolves on the year shoot 38% from 3 on above the break threes, which is second best in the NBA. They shot just 30% tonight, 9 of 30. And Houston, conversely, shot 48%, 11 of 23 on above the break threes, and they only shoot 35% this season, which is right at league average. And Timberwolves' opponents shoot only 34%, which is 5th lowest in the league. So, it was just kind of a, got to make shots to win in the NBA. And tonight was just one of those nights where, 2 teams kind of diverged from their norm. So if the Wolves can get back to shooting the way that they normally shoot it and playing, defense, especially above the break, the way they normally do, I think we can at bare minimum get a competitive couple of games here and hope that Julius Randle be back maybe for the second one, but we'll see.
I'm glad you called out turnovers, though, because, I don't know how much they've improved from like a statistic or analytic, but that first 6-7 weeks of the season was I wanted to claw my eyes out sometimes just sitting on the couch watching. It felt like they were the worst team in the league at turnovers, but all of a sudden the last 2 weeks or so, right? Take out the All-Star break, that free week there. But like the last 8-9 games, I know they haven't like blown anything out of the water, but they just seem so improved in that aspect of the game. It really feels like they have cleaned up their turnovers quite a bit. And granted, the bar was set so low they couldn't have got any worse, but it feels like that has been a part of the catalyst that has helped them improve and chalk up a couple wins here leading into the All-Star break. Great stuff as always. T-Wolves, I mean, they just fall apart in clutch time tonight with the game on the line. Couldn't buy a bucket. Final score versus the Rockets, 121-115. They dropped to 31-26 on the year, 5 games above 500. I believe they're sitting in the 7 seed right now. We'll see how the rest of these games shake up tonight. But as always, huge shout out to all the everydayers that always make us your first listen. All you guys coming in the chat with us from game to game, make sure you like, make sure you subscribe if you haven't already, and go follow Jack on X at JR Borman 13. He's live from the Target Center during almost every home game. Again, OKC up next. That's Sunday night, 8:30 p.m. tip-off. We'll catch you right here, same time, same place. But until then,